All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping back in time into this world of stone fortresses and incredible murals, a world that had to tell its most epic stories without words, but with images. We are going to decode the secrets of Romanesque art.
But first, let me ask you this. How would you share the most important stories you know if almost nobody in your audience could read a single word? How do you do it? Well, that, right there, was the huge challenge that Romanesque art was built to solve.
So we're planting our feet firmly in medieval Europe, somewhere between the 11th and 13th centuries. You've got these epic pilgrimages happening, kingdoms are shifting, and pretty much all the power is held by one single institution, the church. And you can see its influence carved into every single piece of art from this period.
Okay, so to really get this art, you have to understand the world it came from. This was a society just completely dominated by Christian faith. And here, art wasn't some luxury, you know? It was a powerful tool that had a really important job. Teach the faith, inspire people, and just fill them with a sense of awe.
And the most obvious way you see this power, it's in the architecture itself. These churches, they weren't just places to pray. No way. They were massive statements built in stone. They were literally fortresses of faith.
The whole goal was to create this feeling of incredible strength, of stability, and, divine protection. When you walked up to a Romanesque church, you were supposed to feel small. You were supposed to feel like you were entering this safe, sacred, powerful space that was totally separate from the chaotic world outside.
And you can totally see how they got that fortress-like feeling just by looking at the architectural DNA. For starters, you have these incredibly thick walls holding up gigantic stone roofs. Now, because of that, they could only put in a few very small windows, which is why the insides are so dark and solemn. The real signature, of course, is that classic rounded arch. The whole church was usually laid out in the shape of a Latin cross, with these huge, imposing towers and apses. Those are the semicircular parts at the end. And tying it all together, that super heavy, continuous barrel vault ceiling.
Let's just zoom in on that one feature for a second, the barrel vault. Basically, think of it as one long, continuous arch that creates this heavy, tunnel-like ceiling. This one architectural choice is what gives you that feeling of immense weight and solid security when you're inside. It's one of the most defining parts of the whole Romanesque style.
But okay, these stone fortresses were way more than just impressive buildings. The second you stepped inside, the walls themselves started talking to you. This is where the sculpture takes over, acting like a Bible carved directly into the stone for everyone to see and understand.
You have to remember, above everything else, Romanesque sculpture had one primary job: to teach. For a population that was almost entirely illiterate, these carvings weren't just pretty decorations. They were the textbook. They were the main way anyone learned the stories of the Bible.
Now, to make sure these stone stories were crystal clear, the artists used a really specific visual language. You'll notice the figures aren't meant to look realistic at all. They're often really rigid and symbolic. Their proportions even get all distorted, so they can fit perfectly into whatever architectural space they're in, like a tall column or a curved doorway. And the themes were always focused on the big stuff: Christ in majesty, terrifying scenes of the Last Judgment to warn people about sin, and all the powerful figures of apostles and saints.
So if you're looking for lifelike, realistic people like you'd see in ancient Greece or the Renaissance, you're kind of missing the point. The goal was never realism. It was all about getting a message across. Every single choice, from the stiff poses to the symbolic sizes, was designed to tell a religious story with absolute, unmistakable clarity. Okay, now picture those dark, heavy stone interiors we were talking about. But this time, imagine them just exploding with vivid color. The story didn't stop with the stone carvings. The murals, the paintings on the walls and ceilings, were the final, brilliant layer of the story.
And just like the sculpture, the painting followed a clear formula to get the message across. Artists used these bold, flat colors and completely abandoned any attempt at making things look deep or realistic. The figures are symbolic, often with these huge, staring eyes that were designed to make a direct spiritual connection with you, the viewer. And the compositions almost always focus on one central powerful theme, especially the image of Christ Pantocrator. That's Christ as the all-powerful ruler of the universe, there to judge everyone.
And really, if you take away just one thing about the entire artistic philosophy of this period, let it be this: whether it was in stone or in paint, the goal was never to show you the world as it actually is, but to give you a glimpse of a divine, higher truth.
So when you take a step back and look at the whole picture, you see it's not just about architecture or sculpture or painting as separate things. The real genius of the Romanesque period is how all of these elements came together to create a single, incredibly powerful storytelling machine.
When you look at its purpose, you can see how it was all connected. Yeah, it was there to teach the illiterate, for sure, but it was also designed to inspire this deep sense of religious awe, to communicate the immense power of the church, and to give people a feeling of spiritual security in what was a pretty dangerous world.
What this really means is that a Romanesque church was a total work of art. It was a complete multimedia experience, centuries before we ever had a word for that. Every single arch, every carving, every brushstroke of paint was a carefully chosen piece in one single, grand, and unforgettable story.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Romanesque art was designed to tell one unified story about what mattered most to that society. So, if the architecture and art of our own cities were to tell a single story today, what do you think that story would be?